Next up, we have a talk called Privacy on the New IBC Blockchain and NYX Mixnet. Please give a warm welcome to CEO of NIM Project, Nixer of a Packet, and Master of Concealment, Harry Halpin.
Okay. We at NIM are basically trying to build infrastructure which can defend against mass surveillance. Mass surveillance is something that people used to think was fictional, but is actually true. Not only the NSA, but any reasonable-sized government or even company can do essentially surveillance on the literally the packets that go across the internet. So you can imagine that you have a godlike enemy that's watching every packet going in and out of the internet, and that enemy can use the packet transfers, their peer-to-peer packet transfers, in the case using Cosmos or Bitcoin or whatnot, to basically track who sent what packet to who, who's talking to who. That's the metadata. And this is the case even when people believe they are being private. So with end-to-end encryption, including Signal, the enemy just has to watch the Signal server, see who's using Signal when and where. They can't read your messages, but they can know who you're talking to. That's also the case with any blockchain, even if you're using Zcash or I don't know what in Cosmos, because I think none of the privacy chains really work yet on Cosmos. These enemies could observe who's doing what. And effectively, even if you use a VPN, the enemy can observe what you're doing, because a VPN only offers like kind of one-hop protection, including decentralized VPNs. And Tors obfuscate your IP address, but only against very weak adversaries. So the internet technologies that we have for privacy are pretty broken, and they have been so for 20 years. And this is increasingly a problem, and various people, such as Fred Wilson, have thought that the large opportunities in terms of the next kind of 10 or 20 years of the internet will be based on privacy, because surveillance is becoming normalized. And there is a historical precedent for this, insofar as that people, how many people here remember the internet before TLS? Remember the little lock, right? So everything was in plain text. You would log into your email, and I could just sit there on a cafe and run Wireshark and steal your email password or your banking passwords. This was very plausible up until 2004 or 5. And then after Snowden revelations, TLS usage skyrocketed, and the fact that you could spend money on the internet without losing your bank info to random criminals is what led to eBay and PayPal and the whole kind of original Web 1 boom. So we think that privacy, particularly in the age of AI, is going to become more and more important, and it's going to lead to the next boom. And we have a number of people that agree with us, including the wonderful Interchain Foundation and a lot of other wonderful validators, some of who I'm sure are here, Supreme Node, Valterium, Swisscom, Swiss Staking. And we believe that there is actually demand for privacy. So a lot of people think that people don't care about privacy, but the fact of the matter is 1 in 8 people has used the VPN. And of the 1 in 8 people, a lot of them are just downloading Netflix, but 1 in 3 of those people said they used it for privacy purposes. However, the problem is that privacy infrastructure happened before blockchain technology. And insofar as it happened before blockchain technology, it was based on a kind of altruistic nonprofit model, and therefore the growth kind of stalled. Right? People weren't being rewarded for running nodes, and so people were like, why am I going to run a node? So Tors had a kind of stable number of nodes for the last 10 years. But Signal, particularly after things got a little bit hectic in the US in the Trump inauguration, saw its usage kind of skyrocket upwards. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to build a holistic full-stack privacy solution called NIM, and it has 2 main components. I'm going to do one component very quickly, because I've talked about it a lot in other forums, the mixnet, and I'm going to talk about a second component which we haven't really talked about before, which is our zero-knowledge enabled Cosmos blockchain. So our solution is a mixnet with a token, an incentivized privacy infrastructure for the network layer, the peer-to-peer broadcast, the VPN level, and an IBC and COSM-WASM enabled blockchain that has zero-knowledge ZK-NIM technology with anonymous credentials built in. And we'll talk about that quite shortly. So what is NIM? So if you want to compare NIM to like a VPN or whatnot, you can see a VPN, the traffic comes in and it comes out. And you can imagine that each of these orange dots is a packet, right? And you see the pattern, the timing and volume, the size of these packets, and the order they're coming in and out the VPN essentially makes a unique fingerprint for every time you'd use the internet. This fingerprint is, by the way, could be used in your IP with information like your IP address in wonderful things such as MEV extraction, right? So we know this is possible. Tor, which people tend to think of as like a magical privacy box, basically sends traffic forward, it bounces around 3 nodes, and it comes out. But you can still see the fingerprints there because the traffic in Tor comes in, first out. So it's fine, like a VPN, obscures your IP address, but that's kind of it. And Tor has the advantage that changes your circuit every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, you get a new IP address. So you don't do too many Cosmos transactions within that 10-minute window. NIM is different insofar as what NIM does is the traffic comes in with that unique fingerprint. The packets are all made the same size, and then they're mixed together. So what that means is the packets do not come in, first out. They're shuffled like a deck of cards. And by virtue of being shuffled like a deck of cards, and they get shuffled 3 times, even an adversary with a God's eye view of the internet cannot figure out who's sending packets to who's talking to who. And this is a generic technique which works not just with applications built on Cosmos, but works with any application. Works with your web browser, works with Signal, works with Telegram. In fact, we already have Telegram working with NIM. And so you can see what the NIM mixnet does is similar to Lightning or to Tor. It has multiple hops, but it has 2 main differences. One, if not enough people are using the network, we add in fake traffic, something Tor or VPNs don't do. So we can disguise even when you're using the network. Second, as I just mentioned, we mix the packets up. We obfuscate the timing of the packets, okay, by adding user-centric delays into the packets. You can set the delay, and people are like, well, how slow is it? We have got the mixnet working so fast. It's all built from the ground up in Rust, and we hired friggin' Daniel Bernstein, who invented Curve 25519, to optimize it. So we've got down to 500 milliseconds for mixing. Okay, 500 milliseconds. That's enough to like fit in the Ethereum validator consensus. And we're going to get it even faster. We think we can get it down to like maybe 300. And so it's tunable. If you want to be super private, you can just be a lot slower. It's fine. If you want real speed, you can be a little bit less private. Push those packets through. And so this is the architecture. You have the user, represented by this little weird space alien guy here. They send to your local machine, which is running NIM, some packets. Those packets are bundled up into the Sphinx packet format, the same packet format used by Lightning, sent into the mixnet, and they come out and they go to an app, right? And that app could be something like Cosmos, right? We can send traffic into the mixnet and into Cosmos. And if they don't mind, could you try to show a little video that I sent in yesterday before 11 p.m.? OK, here we go. Just if you could so this is, just so people know NIM is real. So this is us running a Cosmos client. And what we're doing is we're sending a transaction from the client over the NIM mix network. This is happening live. It's a random response string. We're sending it through, and it's going through the NIM mix network over, and then doing that peer-to-peer broadcast after it's been anonymized by sending it to the NIM mixnet. So this all works today. You can literally, if you're like, how do I prevent people from like using my timing information and my IP address from extracting value from my transaction? So I want to use Cosmos in an anonymous way on the network level. We can do that today. You can see we just sent the transaction through. So back to the slides. So, this works. It's not vaporware like most projects. And we have a token. Who doesn't? Who doesn't love tokens? The token does not exist as does exist because before Bitcoin itself was even invented, people were trying to add reputation to mixnets. Because the problem is I'm sending traffic through a mixnet. What if the node drops the traffic? Then I lose my transaction. I have to resend it. It's slower. It's a pain. If your node does that, it should be punished. If your node sends it through correctly, it should be rewarded. So we have a unique proof of mixing reward scheme, which basically samples a network using a VRF, which I think Secret will discuss later, and basically fairly samples using a secret shopper-like packet to see if the network is working right or not. So imagine the system itself is sending in anonymous packets, and they're looping those packets through the system, and they're using that traffic to judge whether the system is performing enough and if the nodes are operating. And we also allow delegated staking. So if you don't want to run a node, but you have a bunch of NIM token, you have some friends that run a node, you want them to make money and you get a chunk, we have that working with a sort of decentralization. And the general thesis is that the NIM value should be the value of privacy itself. So as the usage of the network increases, which we hope it will, and we're planning to launch a VPN product by end of the year, then essentially the value of the token should increase or decrease. And I'm not going to go into token in detail, but if you're interested, just Google that, reward sharing for mixnets. We even did Nash equilibrium proofs that it's fair and you shouldn't cheat. But what we're interested in talking about today is Cosmos. How does NIM work with the Cosmos ecosystem? So what we have done is, there's a big question. When I use NIM, how do I discover the nodes? How do I know what the first hop into the network is? And this whole time, secretly, for about 3 years now, since 2019, we've been building on Cosmos, and we've built a directory authority system which has the nodes, has the reputation score, keeps track of all the tokens using a number of complex COSM-WASM contracts. And we've been running this all on a production-level blockchain called NYX, which for those of you who are Greek mythology fans, is the goddess of the night. And it's a Cosmos blockchain which basically has a few cool tricks. So one of the problems, if I want to block Tor in China, I just take down the directory authority system. So I think we've discovered a genuine use case for blockchain-based systems. The genuine use case is that blockchain systems, by virtue of peer-to-peer broadcast, have some level of censorship resistance, and currently work in China and other places. So we put the IP addresses and the key material into the NYX blockchain and broadcast that around. So everyone always has the most up-to-date set of mix nodes to run their traffic through. And if you're interested in joining the validator set, I'll be at the validator gathering tomorrow, and our network is currently a permissioned network, but we will depermission it in July. So this means anyone who's running a validator can jump in and help privacy and make some rewards. It's not just, we run COSM-WASM, and we have a developer-centric application we'll be launching. So before I go into that, let me just look, this is our current node set, so you may recognize Figment, peer-to-peer, Swiss staking. So please, when we depermission in July, and if you're interested in talking about running a validator, just grab me. We have a booth. Talk to us. We'd be very interested in getting new validators on the network. So these aren't mixed nodes. The mixed nodes are mixing the traffic, and the validators maintain the consensus of all the traffic. And then we'll be launching our blockchain, which currently has the ZK stuff in testnet, a zero-knowledge system. So this should allow developers to easily build applications such as private voting contracts, private payment systems, other zero-knowledge systems. And it's built on a technology called anonymous credential tech, which I'll talk about in 1 second. And we also are building a way to reward developers. And how we're going to reward developers is that 60% of the NYX token, so this is the native token of the NYX blockchain, will be distributed directly, similar to Canto, if people are familiar with Canto, but hopefully not as scammy, the people that do valuable work for the NIM ecosystem and the NYX ecosystem. So if you upload a smart contract and it gets some work, then you will people use it, you will automatically get some of those rewards, not just as a validator, but as a developer. Because ultimately, the value accrues to blockchains not just due to validators, not just due to users, but due to developers. And we think developers should have a fair way to get those rewards. And eventually, we would like the blockchain to be democratically controlled by developers based on the amount of work that they've done. So we will transition NYX over to DAO, and we're going to use this git split mechanism to basically automatically partition out smart contract rewards to developers who build privacy-enhanced apps, because people should be rewarded for contributing to global human privacy, which is a common good. And then finally, we have a zero-knowledge technology built on the blockchain, a bit different than others. It's similar to what's called an anonymous credential scheme, based similar on Chaumy and eCash. But effectively, the way you want to think about it is, ZK snarks and starks allow you to encode arbitrary information in zero-knowledge circuits. But we're very interested in recording arrays of information with specialized proofs into zero-knowledge. So that's simpler for developers to think about, rather than having to I need to use this weird DSL and then encode stuff in a polynomial and maybe it doesn't work out. What we will do with ZK NIMs is it will be it's as simple to use as a JSON array, which I assume every developer here has at some point in their life parsed a JSON array and used it, but that the JSON array can contain different values in zero-knowledge, which can be then selectively disclosed to the people that need to read those values, but only those people. And that will allow all sorts of things like privacy-enhanced payments to any token, zero-knowledge KYC, unlinkable pseudonyms. And the cool thing about our system is that it doesn't try to build a global identity system. Because we think, I personally at least think, that I do not want myself or my children living in a world where I have my eyeball scanned by WorldCoin in order to prevent to give blockchain Sybil resistance. I think we can do one better. We can build privacy-enhanced systems which do not link to permanent identifiers. I'd rather tear my eyes out than have my eyeballs built into a permanent identifier for myself. And that these identity systems do not need identity. What you want is to show that you have some attributes, that you're check, that you're over 18, that you voted, that you didn't vote, that you agreed with the DAO proposal, that you didn't agree with the DAO proposal. And all sorts of really cool things like anonymous DAOs and other technologies can be built on top of zero-knowledge proofs without full-blown identity systems that use zero-knowledge as some sort of, I don't know, kind of hand-wavy trick to try to avoid privacy issues. And lastly, the system, of course, decentralized. What's different about running a NYX validator than a NIM validator is that the NYX validators will enable these zero-knowledge operations, which are not currently enabled in any other Cosmos chains. We will work with Interchain. We're already working with Interchain Foundation to eventually package it all up so it can be a Cosmos module that can then work with any other blockchain. And even if that takes a while, the NYX blockchain is IBC enabled, so you want some privacy, you can always IBC over to us, do your private stuff on NYX, and the IBC back out. So this is our roadmap. We've already launched, and we're launching NYX this year. NIM, you can come to our workshop tomorrow. You can already use it with Monero, Zcash, Aztec. Anyone who's building a zero-knowledge system who has any common sense realizes that you need anonymous networking, not just blockchain, because otherwise the networking stack doxes whatever you're doing on the blockchain. We are currently, I think, the only ones that provide that. And then once we're done releasing the NYX blockchain, we're going to try to release a VPN usage, a kind of VPN-like app that's actually private, that doesn't take your credit card numbers, and that this kind of VPN app, we think, will reach mass market usage and will be one of the few real use cases, we think, of blockchain technology in the future, enabling censorship-resistant, private access to the internet to anyone on planet Earth. And as someone who spends a lot of time in places like the Middle East, it's desperately needed right now, more so than ever. So that's it. I'm happy to answer some questions if there are any questions. But I just want to end. I mean, the reason why we do privacy systems is not because we're deviants, although we love deviants that want to hide everything. It's because we support human freedom. And ultimately, the freedom to be who you want to be, to do what you want to do, to grow in to what you want to become is more important than any particular technology stack. We've built what we think is the best stack to enable human freedom, and we do hope you can join us. And if you have something better, we'd love to know about it. Please stop by tomorrow. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So we do have one question here from Slido. It's anonymous again, asking, could the NYX validator censor packets? How do you protect against that?
So how you protect against the NYX validator censoring packets is the way that you defend against any validator censoring packets, which is you probably should send your packets to more than one validator. And if you send your packets over the NIM network, you can send them in an encrypted manner and obscure your IP address, so then the NYX validator would have to censor everyone's packets. They can't just censor your packet. So again, I think we can solve some of the MEV problems by really leaning hard on privacy. And like I just said, ZK-NIM gives you shielded transactions on-chain. The mixnet gives you network-level privacy. So in order to basically drop your packets, they'd have to drop everyone's packets, which sort of defeats the purpose of censoring. Does that make sense? Okay, cool.
All right.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you.